You're listening to Clearing the Haze, episode number 17, Why Listening is More Important Than the Words We Say. Welcome to this week's episode of Clearing the Haze. I'm your host, Chuck Marting, and this week's topic is why listening is more important than the words we say. You know, this is a great topic, and it came about in conversations that I've had with my wife and listening when we're working with our clients, our staff, family, and also when reading the book by Ed Mylett called Max Out Your Life. It was also on his podcast that he has, the Ed Mylett Show, where he covered this topic of listening in a very extensive episode. And that episode was the 12 master steps to max out your listening skills. Both of these resources inspired me to do today's episode with you. So what you're hearing today is basically my notes that I've taken, my feelings, and what I will share with you today that I feel will help you not only with your prospects, your clients, your friends, or even your family members, but also yourself in developing those skills that are so vital in our industry, and that is in communicating with people. If you don't know who Ed Mylett is, just to give you just a real brief overview, he is a very successful entrepreneur, self-made millionaire. He does a lot of coaching. He does a lot of inspirational speaking. And I'm sure that if you go and you listen to his podcast, you'll be inspired too. And his intent is in developing and helping everybody and becoming the best that they can be. Now, I don't know about you, but I love these types of shows. It helps motivate me, keeps me going, helps put a lot of things in perspective as well for me. And it also helps me in evaluating some of the things that I could be doing better or I could even improve on, such as the topic that we're speaking on today, which is our listening skills. One of my favorite quotes that Ed Mylett has given was, "Sustainable success is not built overnight. Real success is the result of consistent, sustained effort." There we go. I will be putting the link to Ed Mylett's website, as well as the book that I'm referring to, Max Out Your Life, and then also his podcast. So please see the show notes for those links so you can check those resources out for yourself. I think that you'll value them and that you'll find a lot of really neat ideas and inspiration in there in helping you to become a better entrepreneur, better leader, and also better communicator. So I have to ask you, what is more important than the words we say? How about our ability to listen? Every business owner and leader that I've read about or listened to has said how valuable the skill of listening is and how in most cases it was the game changer to many situations that they found themselves in. And one of the first things that Ed shares in his podcast on this topic is that people we interact with and communicate with don't always respond to what they see or hear, but to what they feel when they interact with us. And that the best way for us to make someone feel good is for them to know that they're being listened to and that they're being heard. He shared a lot of particular things in his podcast, and that everyone that we listen to and everybody that we're communicating with, they want to feel important. They want to be heard. We all do. And we all want to be liked. So the benefits of being a great listener are magnified in every aspect of the relationships that we have and we build. So 3 things that Ed identified in the benefits of being a great listener was, first, that people will like you more. Second, you're going to learn more from those individuals. And number 3, it takes the pressure off of you during the conversations that you're having. If you're listening more than you're talking, you're going to be able to have a lot of that pressure taken off of you. You're also going to understand and know what it is that you need to address with this individual. The benefits are magnified with every relationship that you're going to have. And so we're going to go ahead and talk about some of these aspects of becoming a better listener that were covered in the book and also in Ed Mylett's podcast that I mentioned just a little bit earlier. And I'm going to talk about each one of these things that I took notes on. And the first thing was that people want to be listened to and heard. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting is that we need to remember that listening is not a gender-specific thing. So we shouldn't be treating somebody differently because they're male or female during that interaction. Sometimes if we do that, examples of that could be belittling or taking a leadership role over somebody, or feeling that we're making that person feel inferior, things like that. So our ability to be present and to listen to people is a skill that we can all improve on and learn to master. This has been one of the skills that I personally have tried to refine and get right over the years. I had a lot of opportunities to practice patience in listening to people when I was a police officer. This was almost on every call that I responded to. Individuals wanted to be heard. That's why they were calling us. They wanted to be acknowledged. They wanted to know that I understood what their situation was and that I was going to take appropriate action on their behalf. Now, going into business for myself, I've found that these very same skills are just as relevant as they were when I was a police officer in helping my clients. I have to listen to them. I also need to listen to the donors when they come in as well. And when they come out of our office, we have to listen to them as well. Sometimes when I'm talking about when we go out of our office is going out on location, going out and providing those services on site for individuals. It's the same thing there as it would be right here in my office or in the office of the client, in communicating and listening to them. Remember to always ask for clarification when you're listening to individuals. As we're listening to clients, prospect, employers, or even those in our personal life, we should clarify talking points we've heard, such as, so what I'm hearing is, if I understand you correctly, what I'm hearing is, can you clarify this for me or help me understand? Doing this will help individuals not only understand that we're paying attention, but that you're also listening to what they're sharing with you and trying to visualize and help them in that situation. The next skill that Ed Mylett had talked about was maintaining eye contact. So when we're talking about maintaining eye contact, don't be distracted or looking around while the individual's talking to you. Stay off your phone, your computer, or other distractions. Make sure that all of those things are not there when you're dealing with this client. You know, I had a client that I went into and we were talking to, and they had their TV in the office and they had headline news. And I felt like I was competing with that TV being on and talking to this client. And so I asked them if they could turn it off, and they did. Now, what was I going to do if they said no? Well, I'd have to deal with it and do the best I could in that situation. But don't be afraid to ask for distractions to be moved or turned off or taken out of the room, or even asking for a different location that you can meet in so that you have that ability to maintain that contact with that individual without being distracted. When you're maintaining that eye contact with this person and you've got rid of all these distractions and things like that, what you need to do during that conversation is you also need to make acknowledgments while the individual is speaking. And what I mean by that, at certain points, it's appropriate to maybe nod your head during the conversation, maybe smile at times during the conversation, maybe even laugh if it's appropriate, and you're both doing that. So these things, under normal circumstances, you would do anyway. If you were meeting with family members, or if you're out with friends and you're going to a restaurant, or you're having a normal conversation, these would be things that you would normally do based on what the body language and eye contact you're having with everybody else, and being able to determine if it was an appropriate time to do those things. So remember that it's just the same as it is in a conversation. You're acknowledging that individual, you're helping them understand that you're there for them, and that you're truly wanting to help them with that situation that they may have at that point. Next, check your body language. It goes right along with the maintaining eye contact with an individual. While you're listening, are you leaning in and listening to this person? Are your arms crossed or your legs crossed during the conversation? A very good point that Ed makes regarding this is also your facial expressions. Do you appear angry, emotionally moved during the conversations? We sometimes can also have the wrong type of facial expression that comes across that can be interpreted by the individual we're listening to, where with them they could also misinterpret that facial expression that we're having, where they truly feel that we're expressing anger or bewilderment or being upset, and it's due to our facial expressions. So we need to be aware of our own facial expressions and be conscious that those expressions can also be taken out of context by somebody else. I can give you an example that sometimes I have to catch myself in certain circumstances where I don't start laughing because of a question or something that I've heard, or being able to maintain that ability to control my emotions. We've had situations where you've had individuals come in, or they have their kids with them or something, and the kid does something off the wall. And even as a parent, I can relate. And so you end up trying to catch yourself not showing that expression of either wanting to help or laughing or whatever. So we got to keep those emotions in check as well when we're listening or talking and communicating with individuals. One of the biggest things that I've had the hardest time with in communicating and listening to other people is do not interrupt them while they're speaking. It's a skill, and I know it's a skill because it's so hard to do and to master. And sometimes the hardest thing that we find during a conversation is not interrupting someone when they're speaking. Sometimes we do this because we're excited or we're wanting to get our point across regarding whatever it is that they're sharing with us. Or we may be afraid that if we don't say what we're going to say right then, or what we're wanting to say, we'll forget. Or what it is we want to say at that moment might not be relevant at a later time. But remember, when we do this, the way it comes across to the person that we're listening to is that our point, or what we're wanting to say at that moment in time, is more important than what that person is saying. My needs and thoughts are more important than yours, or I'm finished in listening what you're saying, or I'm done, so we'll go ahead and move on. You also have to avoid saying things out loud such as, wow, I got it, right, yeah. We use these words during conversations, as Ed Mylett explained, as nudges to help move individuals along in the conversation, or to encourage them to finish what it is that they're saying, because we have something that we're wanting to say, and at that point we feel that what we're having to say is more important than what they're saying. So understand how that comes across and why it's important to not interrupt individuals when they're talking. I find this a lot when I do presentations. One of the things that I do when I first start a presentation is tell everybody, hey, look, I'll answer questions and everything. If we can do this at the end, that would be great. That way we can cover all this material, because sometimes when an individual throws a question out, it can derail the whole conversation during a training. And also, being a presenter, when you're dealing with one individual's needs at that point with a question like that, you can see the facial expressions of everybody in the crowd and everybody around. And you have some people that understand where this individual is coming from. You have others that are obviously annoyed. They're having to listen to this individual's question, interpreting it that they don't get what's going on, or they're not listening, or they're just wasting everybody's time. So those things can be interpreted as well as, somebody not listening, that their questions or their issue at that time is more important than the whole group's. So it can go a long way in just knowing that interrupting someone during any type of a conversation, whether it's in a large group or individually, can affect the whole balance of the conversation and turn it and have it go into a different direction because of that. Along with that, do not finish an individual sentence. During conversations with people, sometimes that individual may struggle to find a word or words to finish their thought or their sentence that they're sharing. And sometimes we jump in with the word or phrase we feel they are struggling to find, or we're trying to help complete that sentence for them. One of the biggest things that Mylett said is, do not do this. Allow that individual to have their time that they need to finish their thought or to find the word that they're looking for. Remember that this is their thought and their words, not ours. And that by finishing sentences or thoughts, that we may even give them the wrong word or the wrong thought, interpreting what we thought they were going to say. And now that really confuses this individual, and they really don't think that we're listening to them now, because now we've taken that conversation in a totally different direction than what they intended it to go in the first place. So understand, by interrupting them and helping them finish their sentences or giving them the words that we feel that they might need, we're not helping them, and we may cause more problems than we thought we were. And our intent may have been very good in trying to help the individual, but the way it comes across, and if you've had individuals do that to you, sometimes you can be embarrassed because you couldn't find the word, but then sometimes it's really hard to pick up that conversation from where you wanted it to go to where now it's at because of that. So just be aware of that and how it can come across to somebody that you're communicating with. As we're listening to people and as they're finishing or concluding their thoughts, we can use acknowledgement statements with that individual to show that we're listening. So during that conversation, when it's appropriate, it's perfectly fine to make statements such as, I agree with you, or you're right, or that's amazing, that's wonderful, congratulations. Doing this acknowledges what they have shared, and doing this, the person feels acknowledged, and it will help them to continue to say more in a conversation or to continue in their thought process at that point in the conversation. If you don't do this, they may feel that you're not even paying attention to them or even listening to them. And this could cause the conversation to finish or not continue, or they'll stop speaking or talking. So again, it's really imperative that we sit there and we acknowledge people. We, just like when we're having a normal conversation with somebody, that we're not worried about being around, or we're not worried about what it is that we're going to say because we're comfortable with them. It's that kind of a situation that you need to try and put yourself into so that you can appear and show this individual that you are listening to them. The next part of the conversation that Ed Mylett had that I hadn't thought much about, but then I have found that I have done this during conversations with individuals, and I'm sure that some of you may have found this too, just because I think it's in our own nature of doing this, and we do it unconsciously. Sometimes it can be very offensive to some people. Culturally, it can be as well. So we need to understand our audience and the people that we're communicating with. And what I'm talking about is that when appropriate, utilizing touch. You know, like I said, during a conversation where this could be appropriate is when someone is very emotional, or you're learning through this conversation that this is a very dramatic situation for somebody. Sometimes during that conversation, just a simple touch on the knee or on the arm or the shoulder, when you've had that conversation with them, is acknowledgement. It shows compassion and empathy. Also, at the end of conversations, being able to give somebody a handshake. Sometimes it might even be appropriate to give somebody a hug or pat someone on the shoulder, or, doing the old fist bump or the high five with somebody. Acknowledgement moments show empathy and understanding in what is being talked about and shared. Always make sure, though, that when you're doing this, that it's appropriate or it's gender appropriate for the situation. And that's something that we all need to be able to understand from the get-go, as if that kind of stuff is appropriate. And if it isn't, then don't do it. But sometimes we do this without even thinking. So be cognizant of that. It is a skill that also shows, like we were talking about in this subject, of listening and paying attention and understanding when it is appropriate, when it's not. I find this next part very hard for me personally, and that is to do less talking in the conversation than the person that I'm meeting with. And Ed Mylett made a very good point. He said that in normal conversations, we usually have a 50-50 split with somebody. But our goal should always be to speak less and giving them more probing questions, which require that person that we're talking to speak more and to give us the answers that we may be looking for. And it goes back to that being comfortable in the situation as well, and not feeling pressured that you have to lead the conversation and to have all the answers that the individual is looking for. When going into any situation, try to determine beforehand, knowing that this is a clue to predetermine what might be an appropriate talking ratio. That is, try for business meetings, sales meetings, or talking with your spouse or children. Each one of those situations is going to be a different type of speaking style. In some business situations, you may be required to speak more than you do listen. In a conversation with your kids, sometimes just listening to your kids and not jumping in with the answer for them or trying to solve the situation for them is going to be interpreted the wrong way. A lot of times you'll have kids that will shut down right away because they automatically acknowledge, you're not listening to me. I mean, think back to the time that you were teenagers, or when you were dealing with things not only with your parents, it might have been a school situation or something like that where you're trying to get your point across, but you weren't allowed to do that. You had somebody else finish. What was your reaction? I know in times that I found myself like that, I just shut down. I didn't bother because they're not listening to me, or they're not going to listen to me. So it doesn't matter what I say at this point. And that's the kind of situation that we're trying to avoid by becoming better listeners and being able to deal with each situation on a different type basis, whether it's business, whether it's personal, family, what have you. Those are the situations that we need to be cognizant of, and how to deal with each one of those situations in an appropriate manner. I imagine the rest of you have found yourself in this type of a situation where you've sat there and listened to somebody and you have no clue where they're going with this situation or what they're even talking about. When you don't understand, we need to ask to understand more. And at times during a conversation, a point may be unclear, or we may not understand what exactly the point is that is being made. So asking a question such as, help me understand, or I don't know for sure what that word means, or I'm not sure I know what you're referring to. These are questions of understanding, and they're helping you to better know what is going on in the conversation and how to respond appropriately. Again, it goes back to showing that you're listening. And in some points, we feel that when we ask a question like that it might be taken as being rude or not understanding. But I can tell you, as somebody that's done presentations and has spoke to crowds and have talked to people, that when somebody does come with a question like that, it helps me to understand that maybe I didn't clarify that point well enough. And so I, for one, appreciate those type of questions because it helps me to be able to better communicate with the people that I am talking to at that point. Sometimes I have found myself, when I've done one-on-one training with individuals, where this next part of what we're talking about will come into play, and that's when someone predicts what you're wanting to say and they try to finish your sentence. This is viewed as you're trying to get someone to finish the conversation. What you have to say is more important at that moment than what the individual is trying to say. But doing this means you're not present in the conversation, and that what you feel, what you have to say, is more important at that time than what's being said by the individual. Sometimes the most important thing that you can do at that point is show that you're 100% interested in what that individual is saying. It's up to us to be present and be interested in what the other person has to say. Sometimes, as Ed shared, we should be overly interested in who we are speaking with or what they have to say. That way, you help people open up as they're talking to you, and it brings more meaning to the conversation. It's also helping them to open up and share more because they sincerely know that you're interested in what they have to say, and so they're more comfortable in saying it. One of the harder things for me to do is trying to differentiate between words and feelings, and this is really a skill that can be developed over time. Some individuals, like I said, are better at catching this kind of stuff. Other people are really good at this, but what we're talking about here is when someone's words don't match the feelings that we're observing during our interaction with them. So an example of this would be if someone is saying something that is very emotional, like a situation like a death or a tragedy or a life-changing situation or something that's very important to them, that we're not acknowledging it with the appropriate feeling at the time. And this can be due to the person trying to stay in control of their own emotions, or not wanting to reflect on that type of a situation, or trying to minimize something that is obviously an emotional issue. Try and make a connection with that individual when you recognize that this is the type of situation that you're in. Showing empathy and compassion is probably the best thing that you can do in this type of a situation when talking to somebody. And, by doing this, again, you're showing that you're listening, but you're also connecting with them on a deeper level, trying to build that relationship of care and trust. It's very hard when people are trying to communicate and speak about something that's very emotional to them. And our being sincere and trying to understand and recognize what it is that they're going through is going to go a long way with that individual when we're talking to them. One of the things that we talked about earlier is not supplying words or sentences to people. And sometimes in certain situations, it could be because of nervousness or not knowing exactly how to respond or even how to express the feelings that are being felt at that moment in time. And it's a natural tendency for us to be giving, to try and give those words and those sentences, or even correcting the certain sentences. But the best thing that we can do is not to do it. Sometimes we do this feeling that it's connecting with that individual even. But the worst thing that we can do is trying to express emotion or feeling for somebody else. Give them the time to be able to express this on their own, to be able to find the words or the sentences that they need, to be able to share with you and express to you what it is that they're trying to communicate. If we can listen for emotion in the words being spoken, then we can understand a lot better just what the person speaking is wanting to convey. Sometimes that could be excitement, it can be sadness, or not any feeling at all. But just listening for those facts and not the emotions can cause us to understand the situation more fully or misinterpret it sometimes. The way we react to the issue during our conversation is crucial. So we have to have those listening skills and understand what's being communicated to us at that time. Sometimes we have to emphasize the point of view that the individual is trying to get across. So when appropriate, what we do is this is, seeing the situation from their point of view, meeting them where they are and taking them where you're going. We have to understand correctly where their thought and emotions are, or the words that they're speaking, so that we're able to say to them when they're done and acknowledging those points and then helping them to meet the objectives that they have and then help them in the situation or delegate the situation in a certain way to help us in understanding what it is that we need to do in that communication process. A lot of times you can do this through what they call connection words or even gestures. If during a conversation, even Ed Mylett, he explained, you have the individual using the same words over and over again during a conversation. And an example that he gives is of an individual using the word literally. And they use it several times during that conversation. It's one of those words. And like Ed Mylett was saying, we all have words during conversations that we have with individuals that we use a lot. And I can think of one phrase that I hear, phrases like, you know what I mean? Or having said that. These are those connection words. And sometimes in order to show acknowledgement or understanding, because this is a word that somebody uses or a phrase that they use quite a bit, it may be appropriate for you in responding to them to use that same phrase, going back to them saying, having said that, or you know what I'm saying. It helps them in knowing that you are paying attention and that you're truly listening to what they say, but don't overuse those words. But by doing this a couple times during the conversation, you'll make that connection with that individual while you're speaking to them. During any conversations that we have, there are things such as using acknowledgement statements. Every one of us wants to know that we've been listened to and heard, and that's why it's important to use acknowledgement statements with individuals. Saying things like, I just want to acknowledge you, or I just want to thank you. I think you're amazing. Thank you for sharing that with me. I've really enjoyed our time today. This was a great conversation. These type of statements will improve your relationship with the individual and build that understanding of trust. Remembering that people want to feel like they're being listened to, and they want to connect with and acknowledge individuals that listen to them and they know that they're being heard. So now that the conversation is ended, you've done your handshakes with them, you acknowledge them, and you've told them that, you've thanked them for what they've shared with you, you've shown them that you understand what's going on. Do we just leave it at that? In today's society, we have so many tools to help us make a better impression with individuals than we've ever had at any other time in history. Something simple that Ed Mylett talked about, and then I'm going to give you one of the things that we do as a company, but following up with a text message. In the age of social media that we have today, it only takes a matter of seconds for you to connect with and acknowledge someone. After having a conversation with someone, sending them just a quick text message, telling them thank you, or recapping part of the conversation that you had with them, it helps them, that individual receiving this message, to be assured that you not only listened to them, but you understood what it was that you guys were talking about that day. It also helps them in knowing that even after the conversation was over, you were continuing to think about that conversation that you've had with them, and that you shared with them what it is that you've remembered and valued during that time with them through your text message. And now you're continuing that connection with them even after you've left. I can really see where a text message could be really convenient. I like that idea more so than I do a email to somebody. But one of the things that we've done in our office that I did from the beginning of our business was understanding how people like to be acknowledged, or that they like to be recognized. And so one of the things that we do is a handwritten thank you card that we give to people that we meet with, or even if somebody that comes into our office and they sign up for our services, we do a thank you card, and it's handwritten. It's a little bit more personalized. It shows that we had to put a little bit more thought into it, and it's tailored for each interaction that we've had with individuals specific to them. And it goes back to what Ed Mylett was teaching, and that is that you're acknowledging what it is that you guys discussed, that you were thinking about it even after that meeting that you had with them. And so one of the things that I do is I have some of those with me in my car. I get done with somebody, and I take about 5 minutes to sit outside in my car and to write this handwritten thank you card, slap a stamp on it, drop it in the mail to them. Now they're getting that, and it's not a pre-made card where it's just generic for the situation. It's handwritten specific for that person, where I'm able to even address some of the things that we talked about in that card really quick to them. But it shows them that I am thankful for that opportunity to meet with them. It is acknowledging them and showing gratitude for that opportunity to meet with them. These thank you cards are really inexpensive. You can find them online. You can have them personalized with your logos and things like that. We just got a generic one that just says thank you on the outside. On the envelope, it does have our company name and address on the back of the envelope so they can at least see and know and acknowledge who it came from. And I think, if I'm thinking correctly, on our thank you card, it does have our logo on the inside. But other than that, nothing else is pre-printed or written in that card. So I would encourage you to do something like that, whether it's you're more comfortable doing it through a text message or even just doing it as we do with a thank you card. But it is very important in this day and age to acknowledge people for not only their time, but their taking time to listen to you, or you being able to listen to them and to be able to provide services that they may need. I really hope that this topic of listening has helped you, and that it's something that you're going to be able to take some parts of and being able to utilize within your own business and in interactions that you have with your clients, even your team members, things like that. That's the goal of this, is to help all of us continue to grow and to be able to further the work that we have, whether it's in the drug testing industry, being an MRO, or whatever it is the case may be that you're in. Hopefully this is going to be something that you find value in, and that it's going to help you in your situation specifically. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Clearing the Haze, and we look forward to speaking to you again next week. But until then, remember, it's your vision, it's your dream, and it's your business. Take care.